Good afternoon. This is Doug Cluck from NOAA in Kansas City with the National Center for Environmental Information. Due to technical glitches and forgetful mind, we are re-recording the North Central U.S. Climate Summary and Outlook webinar done on January 19th, 2017, originally done by Kelsey Jensko, state climatologist for Montana at the University of Montana. Anyway, I'm going to be doing the presentation. Hopefully this all turns out, and we'll have the recording on the website soon. So, this is a picture of Kelsey and his cohorts there at the Climate Center in Montana. And as we move on to the next slide, we'll see the general information that this is a collaborative and coordinated presentation from NOAA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Drought Mitigation Center, High Plains Regional Climate Center, Midwestern Regional Climate Center, and the American Association of State Climatologists. The next webinar in February will be on the 16th, where Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center will be providing the information. And again, as it says in the email, the archive of these past webinars, the recordings, and the PDFs of the presentations are all at those URLs. So this is the agenda for this presentation. We're going to be looking at current climate conditions from a historical context, recent climate conditions, and then current prospective climate impacts, climate outlooks, and discussion. Beginning with a look back at December, you can see that generally temperatures across Montana, Wyoming, into the Plains states were cooler than normal for the month of December, but the rest of the upper Midwest, all the way stretching all the way to Michigan and Ohio, were near average in terms of temperatures. In terms of precipitation, though, some of the wettest years on record were realized for the states of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Minnesota. There was a general wetness towards the upper Great Plains and upper Midwest, and near normal conditions sort of in the eastern Midwest. Southern Midwest showed signs of actual being a little bit drier than normal. Looking back at October through November and December of 2016, you'll notice that, again, the region that we're focused on, generally the upper Midwest and upper Great Plains, was warmer than normal, much warmer than normal, actually, across most of that area. If you look way to the south, you'll see New Mexico and Texas have never been warmer during this period. If you look over at the precipitation, you'll see that it was very wet in Montana and Wyoming from October to December of last year, and relatively wet across, again, the northern tier of states. Some dryness creeping in there across Kansas to Kentucky, which did cause some problems in terms of fires and a few other things. Breaking down the temperatures into different time categories, looking at the monthly departure from normal in terms of temperature in the upper panel on the top of the screen on the left. You'll see that it was pretty chilly in much of Wyoming, Montana, and the western Dakotas, as well as down into the Front Range of Colorado and the high plains of Nebraska and Kansas. A little bit warmer and actually a little bit above normal as you move to the east, especially as you get over into Kentucky and Ohio. Looking at the last 3 months, well, actually from October 10th till now, you'll see that temperatures sort of follow the same pattern, but the temperature in terms of warmth were quite a bit warmer across much of the Midwest and into the Great Plains, actually into Colorado as well, with sort of a confined, slightly less than normal cooler, in other words, cooler conditions across most of Montana, portions of the western Dakotas and Wyoming. And then looking at the entire year, last year, 2016, you'll see that we were anywhere from 1 to 6 degrees above normal across the entire north-central part of the country. This was the second warmest year on record for the continental U.S., that's the lower 48 states. And that, of course, is always interesting from a climate perspective. And then looking at precipitation for the same periods, first the last 30 days up on top and left, you'll see that precipitation has been generally pretty widespread and relatively heavy for this time of year. This isn't necessarily the wettest time of year by any means. In fact, in many parts of the upper Midwest and Great Plains, it's one of the driest seasons, driest months of the year. But nevertheless, the percentage of normal precipitation was anywhere from up to maybe 400 to 500%, maybe even 800% of normal in some places. Again, if you don't expect to have a lot of moisture during that season, it doesn't take that much more than normal to reach those very high numbers. Nonetheless, those are still pretty extraordinary numbers where you see the deep purple, if you will, and even in the violet colors there. A little bit drier in portions of central Missouri into Illinois, and that's kind of some lingering dryness. And then if you look at the last 3 months from October 20th through yesterday, you'll see that generally that dryness has continued or has been worse from eastern Kansas into most of Missouri and southern parts of Iowa, also parts of western Kansas and eastern Colorado, kind of in a band there. And then to the north of that, though, much wetter than normal across, let's say, central Wisconsin west through most of Minnesota, northern Iowa, the Dakotas, and portions of Wyoming and portions of Colorado as well, at some higher elevations anyway. And then looking at the year of 2016 for precipitation, the entire year, you'll see that there are areas of dryness again. Parts of Missouri, south central Iowa has had some issues, as well as western Illinois. You'll see some dryness also in Ohio that we realized in portions of the summer. Also some dryness for the year of 2016 across the Black Hills area of South Dakota, which is western South Dakota, and northeast Wyoming. And then generally a drier than normal year in much of Colorado. Wetter than normal across much of Montana, and especially that north central part, and portions of Wyoming. The upper Midwest, generally wetter than normal as well. Next slide shows precipitation and temperature impacts more or less recently that we've seen. Pictures of trains having difficulty getting through the very deep snow in portions of South and North Dakota. Part of that is the amount of snow, part of that is the fact that it was blowing so much. Above average snowpack, obviously in portions of the Dakota. We'll talk about that later and show where that is. There is the potential, of course, with that much snow, should it melt quickly or have heavy rain on it, or a late melt or something like that, that could cause problems, mainly in tributaries and such around the area where that heavy snow is. There has been some reports of water in the fields already in Iowa and other places in Illinois from recent snow melt. We've also heard that most of the Ohio Basin has melted out, so there's not a lot of snow lying around, but soil moistures are relatively wet, something else we'll talk about a little bit later. There have been reports of minor ice jams in some states, but no major impacts, mostly to agricultural lands. Freezing, there have been a couple freezing rain events across the central part of the region, and that's a little bit unusual in terms of the timing, the coldest part of the year, and the fact that quite a bit of rain has fallen over the last month or so. Again, it's not the time of year to get a lot of rain. Last year we did. That was it was a very strong El Nino, if you remember, and there was quite a bit of rain just after Christmas, causing major flooding in portions of Missouri, Illinois, Wyoming, or Wisconsin. But that was last year. This next slide shows the modeled soil moisture. You can see there's areas of dryness still showing up in Missouri like you would expect them to based upon what we just talked about. Quite a bit of wetness there in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and northern Iowa. Overall, soil conditions are relatively wet. Not a huge surprise for this time of year. If they were dry like they are in portions of Missouri, we do want to watch that, should that continue into the spring and especially the summer. Next slide. Next slide shows the soil temperature map and what temperatures are and how cold it really is. You'll see that there is obviously a gradient from basically northwest to southeast. Temperatures under snowpack tend to sort of moderate a little bit, so you may see some areas with that are further north that have warmer conditions, but that's generally due to a deep snowpack protecting the soils from harsh Arctic air intrusions. Next slide is a culmination of snow water equivalent, which is the amount of water you get when you melt a column of snow that's sitting on the ground. You'll see there in Bismarck, North Dakota, around Bismarck, North Dakota, sort of stretching just north and east of Rapid City to north of Fargo there, quite a swath of very heavy or very dense, if you will, snowpack, and relatively deep snowpack as well. This translates out to 2 to 4, and maybe even in some cases 4 to 6 inches of water sitting on the ground, and that is unusual for this time of year to have as much as they do. You'll see that snowpack is confined to North Dakota, northern Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, and a little bit into eastern Montana. And then, of course, the usual snow pack in the mountains, which is not uncommon to see that. And then that's the map on the top. The map on the bottom shows departure from normal snowpack. So where you see blues, you see that's generally above, and the deeper the blue, the more departure, if you will, or greater than normal number of inches of snow on the ground. The yellowish areas show areas where snowpack is below normal in terms of these places. So in the Great Lakes, you may see areas around Lake Michigan, just to the east of Lake Michigan, but also all the way down into northern parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, through Des Moines, back into Sioux Falls, and that kind of place, and Nebraska. You'll see that there's been a snow deficit, if you will, thus far this year, or I should say for this time of year. The little map over there on the left is very hard to see the numbers in there, so I'll talk about the colors instead. Where you see dark blues, you generally are having well above normal snow water equivalent as compared to normal. So the state of Colorado, for example, is well above normal in terms of snowpack. Most of, and that includes southern and southwestern Wyoming, and western Wyoming for that matter, all above normal in terms of snowpack. It's when you get to the yellows and browns is where you start seeing, again, a below normal snowpack for this time of year. Greens are near normal for the most part. So we're kind of in a situation where we've only maybe gone through 50 or 60% of the accumulation time of the year, so we still have quite a bit of time to go for these numbers to improve before kind of sort of the spring melt-off begins. These are plots of just looking at the Missouri River Basin and above Fort Peck Dam and above a couple different graphs there, above Fort Peck and total Fort Peck to Garrison areas of runoff, mainly due to snowpack in Montana. You'll see on the leftmost graph, we're below normal or the average in terms of snowpack, which we just talked about. In portions of Montana, a little more generous, a little bit above normal when you include Fort Peck to Garrison, which includes some of those basins in Wyoming. So again, nothing too critical right now in that area. We'll focus more on these in February and March as we get closer to critical seasons. These are generally stream flow amounts. You can see where there's blues and greens and such that we're relatively tracking near normal in terms of stream flow. Obviously, in the southeast, they have a very low stream flow because they've been in a severe drought for quite a while. Things have improved up there. You don't see a lot of these dots in the upper plains and such because of icing conditions, and the gauges just don't work very well this time of year. But there are a few locations there. Great Lakes water temperatures and ice cover show that the total ice cover for all of the lakes is only 12.3%. That's somewhat below normal. This is a little bit more than we had last year, but last year was an exceedingly warm year at this time anyway. Again, it was a very strong El Nino year as opposed to this very weak La Nina year. We'll talk about that a little bit later. U.S. Drought Monitor from today, the updated version, shows some dryness across Missouri. Again, based on everything we've said, it's not surprising. There's actually been a scaling back of drought across portions of Kansas. You can see down in the lower right-hand map areas of improvement, which tend to be that light green color. They've improved one class. In other words, they've gone from D2 to D1 or from D1 to D0 in some cases. But for the north central area, it's mainly the southern parts of the region that we're concerned with. Still worried a little bit about the Black Hills and such region, if you will, in South Dakota. We'll have to see what happens to that over the next couple months. This is the 7-day outlook. This is an accumulated amount. So over the next 7 days, you would expect this amount of precipitation to fall. This comes from the National Weather Service, which is part of NOAA, and these are updated on a daily basis. But anyway, over the next 7 days, you see sort of a tongue of moisture across northern Nebraska, maybe back into Wyoming, and then kind of ballooning a little bit as you kind of go east into the Great Lakes states. So they're expecting some precipitation there. You can see again, California is going to get hit with a big storm, as well as the southeast part of the country where there has been that kind of lingering drought. So, but in terms of this region, there really, especially in the Missouri Basin and down in Missouri where it's been dry, there isn't a lot of indication of at least heavy precipitation on this map. Looking out a week, 2 weeks actually, days 8 through 14, we sort of see this bubble of cool air coming in into the west coast. That's better chances than normal to be cooler if you see blue. So you see that the only portion of the north central part of the country that's above, has better probabilities of being above normal, really are around the Great Lakes for that matter, and then near normal between that and I guess that you call it the bullseye in Salt Lake City or in Utah, where cooler conditions will exist. From a precipitation point of view, you see where you see brown colors, there's a better chances for less than normal precipitation. So relatively dry in these areas of brown, tan colors, and above normal chances for precipitation of greater than normal precipitation across the upper tiers of states, generally stretching from the Dakotas through the Great Lakes. The El Nino forecast, or ENSO forecast, it's the El Nino Southern Oscillation is what that stands for. But it basically what this shows, and if you look very closely, you can see the DJF stands for December, January, February. The JFM stands for January, February, March. Anyway, this is tracking this 3-month period, each 3-month period into the future. I would not put a lot of weight in anything beyond probably March, April, May in terms of how this may turn out. It's having a tough time resolving itself right now. The models and everything we look at are showing that this very weak La Nina that we're in right now is about to end, and sometime probably in February it will officially be over, which puts us into this green category, which is neutral, and that's the highest probability for the next few months and really through the summer. And what does that mean? Of course, is actually a $1 trillion question. It means one thing it does mean is that our confidence in our forecasts for this period are lower than normal. So there tends to be some conservativeness, if you will, when it comes to the outlooks and such, which you'll notice as well. And just to reiterate what La Nina means in terms of North America generally, doesn't always turn out this way, but often does. And has somewhat this year. I'll say these colder temperatures across the northern plains have been realized, and wetter conditions, maybe that taking that wetter condition on the west coast a little bit further south actually, and into the mid-montane, intermontane region here in the west. But for the most part, it's warmer and drier to the south and cooler and wetter to the north, just generally speaking. This reflects that pattern a bit. This is the monthly outlook for February. You'll see that probabilities for below normal temperatures slightly above normal. The chances for below normal temperatures are enhanced for the northern plains and such slightly. You also see for the northern plains precipitation probabilities are enhanced slightly as well. Also for the Great Lakes region, you'll see that. For the rest of the region, in terms of temperature and precipitation, it's equal chances of above, below, or near normal conditions. So not a very strong forecast in terms of one way or the other right now. Looking out March, April, May, and by the way, I'll go back. We left out the February, March, and April version. The 3-month version of February, March, and April. It is not much different than these maps, maybe a little stronger and a little further west below normal all the way to the west coast. And then in terms of precipitation, the probabilities pretty much connect from the Great Lakes all the way again to across Minnesota and into Montana. And then the seasonal outlooks for March, April, May show a similar pattern in a way. We've taken out the chances of below normal, enhanced below normal temperatures to the north and kind of replaced those with a little bit of a push of warmer, better probability of warmer conditions into the southern part of the area, certainly from southern Wyoming all the way over to southern Michigan. Enhanced probability of above normal temperatures for that period. Also enhanced chances for above normal precipitation across, really the northern tier estates. So we'll see if that's realized. Those aren't very strong probabilities, please understand. So it's relatively weak confidence forecast there. And this is even a weaker one, to be honest with you, especially with precipitation. But in terms of temperature, there's a better idea that we're going to be warmer than normal across much of the north central part of the country. Just this pocket of equal chances in the northern plains. And then in terms of precipitation, really no enhanced probabilities of above, below, or near normal in this map. So not a lot to base our forecasts on at this point. Again, tune in next month. It should be more helpful then. In summary, goes like this. For the past month, it's been a little bit cooler, somewhat cooler actually, in the west, especially in the northwest part of the north central part of the U.S. That's Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, and slightly warmer to the east, and generally east and southeast in terms of above normal temperatures. Precipitation has been much above normal across much of the region, and the only area really that it hasn't been above normal is sort of the south and eastern states, sort of the mid-Mississippi area, Illinois, Missouri, and such. And then snowpack in Montana and some of the mountain snowpacks in the west. Generally high in Colorado, and as you go north to Montana, you see that sort of slacks off to near normal and then below normal, but not severely below normal for this time of year. Still a lot of accumulation season to go, so we'll see. Quite a snowpack in the high plains, especially in North Dakota, and some of that extends into South Dakota as well. Not really a forecast on that, except that we have seen enhanced chances for above normal precipitation continuing for those areas. So we'll have to watch that pretty closely in terms of flooding, and really we're talking perhaps Red River flooding and maybe some tributaries here and there to the Missouri. Drought conditions have contracted slightly in portions of Kansas. There are still areas under sort of what we call a D1 or severe drought that we'll have to see what happens with that, especially if things get warm and precipitation doesn't come back. And then finally, the La Nina conditions that we are under, and believe me, they're very weak, should slack or should transition, is a better way to say that, into neutral conditions as we move into February, which isn't necessarily a whole new ball game per se. There is a propensity for the atmosphere to continue to act like there's a La Nina going on, at least for a few weeks, if not a couple months. So that's why we see the patterns that we do on the Outlook forecasts that we showed you a little bit earlier. And then finally, for those of you who want further information or want contacts or want a little bit more information, these are the places to go for that. You're welcome to go and get that information. Oh, yeah, and these are individual contacts. That's me in the middle, Doug Cluck at NOAA.gov. Feel free to call us at any time. And I should have had Kelsey put his name up here instead of Stuart, who gave the talk last time. Anyway, Stuart is, or Kelsey, who made this presentation and is more or less responsible for the content, although much of it comes out of NOAA and other federal agencies and such. We're very thankful for his presentation, and not thankful for not pushing the recording button when I should have. So anyway, have a great month, and we'll see you back with Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center on February 16th. Thank you very much.